McLaren dominated the opening day of the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix with a papaya 1-2 in both first and second practice, followed by a big surprise. From Racing News 365, my name is Nick Golding, and I'm delighted to be joined, as always, by lead editor Ian Parks. And Ian, we've got to start with McLaren because I think that is as perfect an opening day the Woking-based team could have hoped for. Oscar Piastri topping both FP1 and FP2 and Lando Norris, and even better for them, their rivals are a little bit away from them.
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. As you just said, a truly dominant day for McLaren. It is only Friday practice. It's always that caveat, of course. But nevertheless, come the end of FP2, the nearest rival to both Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris was, surprisingly, Alpine's Pierre Gasly, a quarter of a second back. What is quite clear, though, is that from Pierre downwards, and it was actually Franco Colapinto, his Alpine teammate, in 13th position. So from 3rd to 13th, those 11 positions, just half a second separating those 11 cars. But between the top two McLarens and Pierre, it was a quarter of a second. So that gives you some idea as to the advantage that McLaren has got. Across the two sessions in particular, just 0.032 seconds separated Oscar to Lando in FP1, and then 0.025 seconds from Oscar to Lando in FP2. So literally a hair's breadth separating those two drivers. But nevertheless, Oscar's got the edge on Lando going into qualifying at this early stage. A little bit for Lando to find. But looking at the race traces and the data that we get following these practice sessions, McLaren seemingly dominant everywhere around the circuit, with the exception of, guess what, folks? Top speed. So that gives you some idea as to just how good that McLaren is going through the various corners that are around this Imola circuit, but lacking that top speed pace compared to some of their rivals. But when you've got a car that can be perfect pretty much through all the corners, that little bit of top speed edge is not really going to make too much of a difference.
It was particularly the first sector as well, the fast and flowing corners, where McLaren were just so much quicker than everybody. And for Red Bull and Ferrari, a really difficult day because both the RB21 and the SF25 looking really unsettled. We saw in FP1, Charles Leclerc collecting the gravel a couple of times on the exit at turn 15. Lewis Hamilton mowed the grass on one occasion at turn 14. Max Verstappen had a couple of massive moments at the last real corner and was quite visibly frustrated with his car, almost punching his steering wheel, it looked like, from on board. Really not happy. And I mean, that has been the story of the day. Red Bull and Ferrari clearly, yet again, on an opening day with work to do going forwards.
Yeah, the caveat to FP1 and why we had all those various little offs and moments, etc., was you have to bear in mind that this is track evolution. The drivers are obviously warming up. But more importantly, what has been unleashed at this circuit, more than any other this season, is a range of upgrade packages on these cars. They vary in depth. You look at Aston Martin, they've got the biggest upgrade package on that car for this weekend, only used on Lance Stroll's car, bearing in mind for FP1 and FP2, compared to Fernando Alonso, who was using the older spec. Again, for Haas, it was Ollie Behrman using the upgrade package on that car compared to Esteban Ocon, again using an older specification. But nevertheless, considerable range of upgrade packages across nearly all of the cars. The only two teams that didn't have anything new at all on their car were Williams and the Saubers. Yes, nevertheless, Williams still up there, still fighting fit. Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz, 9th and 10th respectively at the end of FP2. So they're still going okay. That car that Williams has produced this year is looking a decent package. You only got to wonder if Williams had the finances to continue to develop, had the budget, where would that Williams be? Nevertheless, still a good position. But overall, yes, that's why we saw these little moments in FP1 in particular. And then you could see once we got into FP2, everybody pretty much up to speed. Track evolution, as I say, had developed. And that's why the times were so much quicker in FP2 on this occasion compared to FP1. And of course, bearing in mind as well, the additional pointer that I need to mention here is that for the first time this season, Pirelli had unveiled its C6 tyre. This is the softest tyre that Pirelli has ever developed in its range. So we can only anticipate that times are going to be that much faster in FP3 in particular, and quite naturally in qualifying. The difference at the moment between Oscar Piastri's time at the end of FP2 compared to the time from Max Verstappen, who set pole here a year ago, is only half a second. So you can imagine with that C6 on board, with greater track evolution, then yes, that time of Max last year is probably going to be shattered by, I would assume, another half a second.
Just to quickly run through the top 10 from FP2 on the opening day in Imola, it was Oscar Piastri at the top of the timesheets ahead of Lando Norris in second, Pierre Gasly in third, George Russell in fourth, Max Verstappen in fifth, Charles Leclerc in sixth, Isaac Hadjar seventh, Yuki Tsunoda eighth, Alex Albon ninth, and Carlos Sainz 10th. We did have two red flags, one in FP1 towards the end due to Gabriel Bortoletti going off of what is technically the penultimate corner, but actually it's really the last real corner. Thankfully, minimal damage. He was okay for FP2. And then in FP2, in the closing minutes of that session, Isaac Hadjar, really unfortunate to become beached in the gravel, was waiting for cars to come past so that it was safe for him to rejoin. And unfortunately, when it was safe to rejoin, the rear of his car became beached in the gravel. Very unfortunate, but nevertheless P7 for him. But as we've mentioned, Ian, that the big surprise today has been Pierre Gasly at Alpine, third on the timesheets, the closest challenger to the McLarens. Yes, maybe the engine was turned up, but obviously he's got a new teammate alongside him as well in Franco Colapinto. And it's got to be said, Flavio Briatore has come out post-session with some interesting quotes.
Yeah, not quite post-session. The interview was actually conducted with Sky Italia during the day. But yes, as you point out, nevertheless, regardless of when he said them, the quotes are quite pertinent, quite interesting, because if you remember, folks, when the driver swap was announced a few days after the Miami Grand Prix, there was an Alpine statement, and it seemed to make it abundantly clear that Franco Colapinto, in replacing Jack Doohan, would only have effectively 5 races to prove himself. Those 5 races concluding in that double header that is the Austrian and British Grand Prix back to back. So, but now, in being interviewed by Sky Italia, Flavio has decided to slightly contradict those words of his, and he's basically turned around and said, along the lines of, just to paraphrase, if I remember the quotes correctly, yes, I do remember something being written along those lines, but just to make it clear, it's not quite 5 races, folks. We are simply going to evaluate. And this is the process that Alpine feels that it should now go through. It's simply a case of evaluation of Franco Colapinto. And what Flavio wants to see from Franco is simply 3 things. Be fast, do not crash, score points. So it's on Franco to do all of those 3 things across these next 5 races. So far, he's come through the 2 practice sessions on Friday here at Imola unscathed. Still a long way to go, of course, over these remaining 5 races to see what happens beyond that. But at this stage, Flavio, yes, just adding a little twist onto his quotes from the original Alpine statement of just over a week ago.
Yes, Franco was in P13 in FP2, 5 tenths slower roughly than Pierre Gasly, so quite a big margin to make up at Imola. But Ian, we've got to discuss, of course, Mercedes, George Russell in 4th, but Kimi Antonelli in 18th at his home race. A bit of a surprise, has got to be said.
Yeah, I'll just quickly go back to Franco just before I answer that question.
Go for it.
I know people are going to think this and maybe mention it in the comment section below. We have to remember, Franco has not been in a Formula One car, with the exception of one TPC test at Zandvoort early last week, since the season-closing Abu Dhabi Grand Prix at the end of last year. So quite naturally, there's going to be a lot of ring rust inside Franco. And yes, he would have been in the simulator, of course, trying to get up to speed. But in terms of actually being sat in a Formula One car, then this was his first 2 serious attempts in any kind of anger since last year's Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Just now, quickly going back to Mercedes, yes, you did see a discrepancy. But in Kimi Antonelli's defense, the reason being is that, unfortunately, he wasn't able to get a soft tyre time in FP2. A little bit blocked during FP2 on his first run, And then unfortunately, when he went again on the second run on the same tyre, the tyre had effectively gone off. And that's why he was languishing in 18th position, just over a second off the pace of Oscar Piastri. Better news with George Russell. We've seen what he's been able to do in that car over the course of this season. The only driver who has appeared in the top 5 in all 6 Grand Prix and the 2 sprints that we've had so far. So that just goes to show where George is at this season in terms of consistency and delivery of performance. And on this occasion, he was exactly 0.4 of a second behind Oscar Piastri in 4th position on the timesheet. So plenty for Kimi to do. There's got a lot to improve on going into FP3 and then going into qualifying. Well, at least Kimi knows, in seeing what George has been able to do in that car so far, that he has plenty of pace to find, and we can only expect greater things on Saturday from Kimi. Bearing in mind, of course, as we mentioned on F1 Update on Thursday evening, this is his home race. He's Bologna born and bred. Bologna just 30 minutes down the road from this circuit. So his home fans are here. They're fully supporting him. They will want to see more from him, but Kimi at least knows, as I say, that there's a lot more to come for him.
And of course, we can only hope that at least some team can find some pace in FP3 to maybe challenge the McLarens in qualifying, because we know how difficult overtaking is going to be in the race on Sunday. Ian, amazing stuff. As always, of course, to those who've been watching this F1 update, let us know in the comment section below your thoughts on the opening day of on-track action, who you think is going to claim pole position. Ian and I will see you after qualifying on Saturday, but please do smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and of course, thank you very much as always for watching. See you later.
And as always, folks, take care from me. See you on Saturday.